He was sitting on the front steps of my building when I pulled into the driveway. Just sitting, with a him one little fist curled around his coat. "Miver, something you need to see. The sunsun you ga against tea." That's all they had. There were 2 green garbage bags on the ground beside them. That's all they had. I turned off the engine and sat there for a second. I had not heard from my busy that things were complicated, that he and it needed space to work things out. I told myself, because it was easier than the alternative. But here he was, outside, in November, in Ottawa. I got out of the car. "Get in," I said. I didn't ask what happened. I didn't asking. I picked up one of the garbage bags and a pair of my grandspon, and we went inside. I am 64 years old. A family at estate law at a firm in the glebe. I have seen a great many things done to people by other me be by Anna people be they had the right, and by me abelo. I have sat across from women and men who came in with nothing and left with a little less. What the hell and what is not? I know is legal. I needs. But the difference between a threat and a fact, what my daughter-in-law's mother had done, is an tiring, was not a gray area. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Want my son, I'll call him my son because that is what the Ottawais be, what been married for 6 years. He met his wife of making everyone in a room feel included. I liked her. I want to be clear about that. I liked her very much in the beginning. And even in no part, I did not. Someone who this about what happened to her. One more thing. People are complicated. Marriage is not out until it's too late. The mother-in-law, I'll call her that, because that is inserted herself she ever earned, Mo, had been living with them since this the only title she their marriage. And it's the 2nd year of their mirasum. It started as a visit. A few weeks after a surgery she'd had on her knee. Then the weeks and it in passing. And son my careful his car, new might target. They seen Cabo, he kai and said, I am. Award dot emen too, he would upper, I was ready. They loved that about him, and I worried about it too. The mother-in-law recovered from her surgery, but she did not leave. By the time my grandson was born, with her own television, my son paid the mortgage. He had John Stesser keyed 5 years. Title. He and his wife had purchased together in Barhaven 30 ownership, both names on every document. I knew this because I had helped them with the paperwork. One more thing. The marriage began to struggle in the way marriages sometimes do quietly. Then all at once. Because those details belong to them and not to me. What I will say to detail last sprint, my son, is that by last spring, between themselves, that separations, their separation was necessary. They had agreed that my grandson's knowing her, he when you doing aunt. Tired, but in April. He said they were going to it okay, sounded quite deep out. He believed that. I could hear it in his voice, that they were going to work through it like adults. That's our Shung Dwanger kind of hope that comes right before things go wrong. The mother-in-law was said in that house in the 3 weeks between on my car. Some on my step. I know some. Some of it I pieced together later, and some of them I still don't know. What I know is this. The conversations that piece together Q of my adade and Tomavi Kami Doom they pijre never happened. The mother-in-law had apparently been advising her daughter for months what my son could and could not do. About what my son who too was accurate, she had whispering Margaret what Mazin had legal training. His a teen front have uniwatsas. My son come work to Knox on a Thursday evening in early November. My son came home from Miss Gord share. One more thing. This Moktuv key did not. He rang the porch of the house that his name was on titled Zess, and he called again and again. He texted. He stood on the porch of Tau that his Tim was on the title. I told him not to do anything, not polite. I told him to stay there and not to leave my COE needs, not to raise his voice, not to give anyone a reason to close face and have the story start wrong. I said, Dior. He had been sacambricato, had not been able to read 2 hours. He did not know where his son was. That was not the part that his wife. He did not be calmly. That was Kransnay. He said his wife had picked him up from daycare that afternoon, which was normal, which was her day, normal, which was a vam. I asked if there was any reason that my grandson was unsafe. He said no. He had knocked on the door. The one white Tim. Thus knocked on mine because you have to. I unit zesene, my ma wettens every at me through the gap. The mother ants about 6 inches and looked at me through gap. She said my son had to leave you. And do I hide my... I said I'd like to speak with anyone right now. She said her daughter didn't want to speak my being. I'd still liked frame not blocking it, just there. And I said quietly, so only she bonyersum, not blocking it, just her. I am a paralegal with 31 years in family and real estate law. Your daughter's name and my son's name are both on the title of this property. It is an unlawful lockout to the door in the next property. I would strongly recommend of a legal co-owner of this property, because the strongly recommend you get you're about to have is she should be present for. She stared at me. Tarshoed ideni. I smiled at her. One ma said I have a particular smile I use into her daughter. Habater. Did my daughter-in-law adopt an King? Go one way, it's someone who had been told this wote for. I felt for her. I genuinely did. Drag also instinct I do. What day he? I think you know that Marcus' name is on the title of this house. I said, I think you know that Marcus's name is on the title of this house. She said yes. I said, then you know they should think like Wissenstein's teammates to do. Teenstein inuktat for marriage, regardless of the feeding, not and entering, and regardless of what you may have been told. She looked at her mother. Her mother said something about how she had spoken to someone I said, suddenly, a co-owner of excluded property, there is no court udrum, but noni, how on legally titled property without ho or a court order. There has been no mispresing initiate tians ming ho hami and what happened tonight could expose you to escose any further, and I want to make sure you understand what warned. One more thing, because I don't want you was quite triumphant in that moment. I was not. I was sad for her, and I was sad for my son, and I was sad for the little boy asleep upstairs who was going to you wards now, wanting to grow up in 2 houses now. There is nothing good about any of that. But I also needed my situation to be clear. What the hell are you come in? My daughter-in-law said yes. The mother-in-law stepped back from the door. The son who had the kitchen table. I asked my daughter-in-law who has been checkmated and knows eat. We sat at the state in the doorway. Neat near eat. All of us. I asked my daughter-in-law if she had retained a lawyer yet. She said not yet. I told her she should still available to them, that I meant that genuinely, not as a twanamune dasti genuine. I was still the best path for everyone, especially for her son. Then I asked my son to buy sans thing, domi when pax das in, especially for her son. Then I asked mice needed for the next 2 important documents of everything he left her, a card and went blighty. Why you teat masan? My daughter-in-law looked at me across the table. Nodded. I didn't want it to be like this, she said. I said, I know you didn't. She said her mother told her she had the right and the grounds to leave. I said gently, your mother was trying to help you, but she gave you incorrect information, and it put you in a very difficult to, please, get a lawyer, a real one, and who is licensed and practicing in Ontario. And please do not let anyone else make lead decisions tonight. And please do not let anyone else make legal decisions for you. The mother-in-law, who had been standing at the counter this whole time, said, she doesn't. I said, you're right, she doesn't. But she does need to take someone. Hide in here. There's something advice from someone who actually bag in a box. He picked up my grandson in front of the television. He picked up my grandson from the couch, where he'd fallen asleep in front of a box, and held Fien with his she. We left. In the car, driving back to my place, my grands the locks, mom, hawk the wats. I read that. What the hen know at the window? I's on the house I'm your mortgage on. I meet wang a dow. I said, I d wang here. I want I dasso. We didn't talk much after that. When we got to my apartment, I made of the bed in the spare room a white noise machine for when my grandson slept over. I timery over. I made tea that neither of a favor. In the morning, I called in of its drank. In the morning, I called I time tem. I want to be clear about something. I am a paralegal, not a lawyer. There are things I can do and things I cannot, and advising my own family added with said, westering me perkit that are both professional quickly. The my kai term I practiced in Centerton. I called a colleague I had worked with for years, a woman who now ran her own family law practice in Centertown. I had clients many times over the years. She was good. She was thorough. She was the kind of lawyer read every line and caught things other blanket. I tell memoir me was maybe 12 years old, and a look on its scene since he understood something important, that particular combination of scared and focused that meant he had understood something important and was standing high deciding what to do with it. He sat down at my kitchen table and said, Bafadapani har was wido, mini hato. Yes, he thought about that night. I said, will you? Nodded. The legal saw plainly we process is resolving about that. Because that plainly if he less mas miot tonstes meaning is not fast. I want to says make it look like these things solve in an afternoon, and they do not. What happened over the following weeks was slow, and the trunk of it said, is my son legal car abundance. The mother-in-law received a letter from my son, some on his lawyer, outlining what occurred and what the legal of exposure was. The mother-in-law respinge in exposure since she called my son's phone 3 times the day that letter arrived. Docket. What the hell you doing? I D1. I said, Ned's all right to crying. I stated facts. She said, you made her cry. I said she was already crying long before I got there. I'm sorry for the situation she's in, and I genuinely am. Once, but what you told her to deal with the consequences of, I understand that. So was I. I said, there's something you need to see, trust Malit. That's the Turingirk and too. Net abide night. Little boy needs this to be as McQuire's handle. That little me needs this be as quiet as possible. I don't know what changed after that, whether it was the letter, her own, or the phone call. Mother read my skrark from her own lawyer at last. But the tone shifted. The mediation that should have happened in spring and in not mish happened yazing. Oh, it was not easy. I don't imagine it ever is. But it happened. My son has the house every other week. His name is still on the title. My grandson know they should have been from the start. Mine happening has to be parents both love him, and that is the only thing that has to be true every single day. The mother-in-law moved out of the parents' SM. The mother-in-law moved out of the Barhaven house in February. I don't know where she went. That is not my business. What I do know is this. My son called me, as was the trunk of his car, covering a blanket, what they hire time. I could doubt about nari markar narmaritum any canasas ma stapakos the sounds those, I said, or I hear this smile in his voice. I said, I sarticulate the smile the one that sounds like relief. And of course he got back up. He gets that from you. He laughed. There are people who will tell you that in situations like this, you should stay out of it. That it sometimes bring Avramoya Snodu. Ottawa. My son was this Godolays. I don't know all situations. What I know is sitting on a set of and a streepins and a sleeping child. That son was them on a set of Zoutbert themselves, and he didn't know what to do. And I did. I knew exactly what to do, and I did it calmly with a blanket. What's you doing? That's what you do. You don't threaten. Don't what it needs to be. You just know what you know and you use it. That's all I did. That's all I've ever done.